Let's dive deep, effortlessly flowing, as you begin to recognize and absorb the power behind the concept of a pattern interrupt. You can imagine, just for a moment, the subtle shift in perception, the natural unfolding of ideas, and how easily things can change when you become aware of what's really happening. You see, it's all so simple, isn't it? It's all about shifting perception, disrupting the flow, and then watching how things effortlessly adjust to a new rhythm. You can feel the change, just like the way a river carves its path, not through force, but through the smooth flow of constant redirection. Isn't it fascinating how a small, simple shift can have such a profound effect? What if I told you there's a hidden power in the moment when everything stops making sense just for a second? When things feel just a bit unexpected, even out of place. That's where it begins. It starts with that tiny moment, that single breath of confusion, where the mind can't quite catch up on what just happened. And it's in that instant, that subtle gap between thought and response, where the mind opens, ready to receive. So picture this: a punch is thrown, swift, sharp, and aimed with intention, and yet you move just so, in a way that feels natural. It's as if you've been hit, as if the force has already landed, but you haven't been hit. You move, and the world around you pauses. The attacker sees it, but doesn't understand. The brain is confused, and in that brief, hypnotic moment of disorientation, something unexpected happens. You can take control effortlessly. Feel that sensation. It's a moment where everything is still, and yet the next moment can be entirely different. Because in that space of confusion, your mind, your very being, it can shift direction. It's like when you're in a conversation and suddenly, the words you expect, they aren't quite the words that are spoken. The moment where your brain searches for the usual patterns, the usual responses, but can't quite find it, and then it opens. Now imagine a handshake. Maybe it's the way it's supposed to go, firm, direct, the usual exchange. But what if, just for a moment, there's a shift? What if it's a little too soft, a little too firm, a little too early, a little too late, just a fraction off? The mind tries to compute, but it's not quite right. And that tiny fraction of time, the mind is suddenly open to suggestion, to new paths, to possibilities that it wasn't considering before. It's in the unexpected, in the out of place, where real change happens. The mind, your mind, is like a sponge, soaking up what you need most, without even realizing it. And you know, every experience has its own unique pattern, its rhythm, the way a conversation flows, the way a moment unfolds. When something breaks the pattern, when it feels just a little too strange, a little too different, that's when the magic happens. Isn't it fascinating how quickly a mind can adapt, and how easily the subconscious can be redirected once you understand how to cause just a little ripple, that disruption. In fact, you can see it in every exchange, in every encounter, where someone tries to guide you, redirect you, confuse you. Just like when someone tries to force their agenda into a conversation, you can feel the subtle shift, can't you? It's the moment where the usual flow of communication is gently disturbed, and you realize there's a different direction just waiting for you. One where you can choose. And now perhaps you notice how, when you take control of the moment, when you learn to bring just a little bit of unpredictability into your own exchange, you unlock a new freedom, a new way of being. You begin to realize, of course, it's all in the subtlety, a tiny shift, and everything changes. You don't have to force anything. You don't need to control every detail. You simply just need to be aware, to notice when the moment is ripe for change. So you might ask yourself, what happens when you become the one who controls the pattern? What would it feel like to be the one who gently interrupts the rhythm of conversation, just for a second, and then guide things in a new direction effortlessly, naturally? To notice how the world adjusts, how the conversation flows more smoothly, when you recognize the patterns of disruption and can use them to your advantage. Imagine that just for a moment. You become aware of the subtle ways that people try to lead you down familiar paths. And just like that, you notice when something shifts. when the normal course of things is disrupted. As you notice, you realize you can lead it, you can guide it, you can direct the flow with such ease, such fluidity, that it seems like everything simply unfolds the way it should. As you begin to recognize these moments of interruption, as you gain the skill of noticing them in everyday life, you might find it easier to flow through your own conversations with a sense of control. It might become second nature, as though you've always known how to do this, how to bring that moment of pause, that moment of confusion, and redirect it towards what you truly want. Because when you understand the power of disruption, you can step into a space where everything shifts. And in that space, things, they can become so much clearer and so much more powerful. So just take a moment now to imagine how it would feel if this ability, this knowing, were to be a part of your everyday. Next time you find yourself in a conversation, in a situation where patterns are forming around you, just notice, feel it. You have the ability to guide it, to disrupt it, and to lead it wherever you want. You don't need to do anything other than to recognize the flow, recognize the pattern, and then just move. And as you move, everything else naturally follows.